Hello and welcome to the second part of Club 100's Welsh Odyssey. We're in South Wales this time at Llandow, outside Cardiff. This is the Premier class, and this is the first of their two scoring finals for this round. Very early in the championship, as you can see, currently led by Chris Powell. So in pole position, early championship leader Parmveen Ajar back on form after the heats. Stu Simons currently second, starts on the front row. Richard Hyam in third, Pete O'Connor in fourth. The only thing up for grabs today is the unofficial Club 100 Welsh Open Championship. No trophy, but there's a lovely spray of daffodils. Who's going to get that hole shot? It's Najar into the hook first, ahead of Simons. O'Connor's come through to third. I'm trying to hang on, ahead of Chris Bell in fifth. On board with Simon Young. Lots of cameras on board with Goddard, looking to the inside of Brian Trott as they go down to Surtees. Can't get it done. Dan Gore trying to go round the outside, losing out to Goddard. Out of McWhirter's, past the concrete sausage. And onto the Lancaster curve up to Chandler's, and it's Najar from Simons. O'Connor on his bumper. On board with Tim Clark in 11th. It's nearly flat through Chandler's. Into the Dell. And that's Chris Powell ahead of us. Current championship leader, former champion. It's been a good start to the season. Down to the hairpin at Raymond's. And it's Ian Blake going down the inside of Chris Bell at the hairpin. Carl Tebbit puts a move on Johnny Goddard down in the midfield, and Maycock's gone past Bell as well. On board with Simon Young into the hook. Streaming through and already down to Surtees, and Najar is pulling clear of Stu Simons. Pete O'Connor putting him under pressures. Darren Teal is down the inside of Jeff Simons and going through to 16th. And at the front is older brother Stuart under real pressure here from Pete O'Connor as they go into Chandler's. And O'Connor goes through. And Simons is on the defensive to hold off Richard Hyam as they go into the Dell. Now there's a chance for Simons to take a breath, to regroup and come again. Hyam right on his bumper as they go into chicane. They'll fan out as they go into Raymond's. Simons coming late and hard on O'Connor. It's fairly unconvincing, and Richard Hyam's going to have a chance to do the pair of them and take second. O'Connor cuts across and tips in over the top of Hyam to hang on to second place. Ian Blake has closed onto the bumper of Simons, and he's towing with him John Maycock and Chris Bell. And Blake's going down the inside into Surtees. Side by side with Simons, he's on the wrong side. Can he get across for McWhirter's? Yes, he can. Ian Blake up to fourth place. Darren Teal down the inside of Goddard. Oh, and he's cleaned his clock there. And he's left Goddard sat astride the sausage. Back on board with Tim Clark. Oliver Allwood ahead of us. Simon Young ahead of him. Through the Dell, trying to get a nice smooth line and a pick up of the throttle on the exit. Through the chicane, Hyam looks to the inside of O'Connor at Raymond's, can't get it done. Ian Blake looking very racy. Overstart finish. Hyam now on the defensive to hold off Blake. Lovely line through the hook from Ian Blake, and he's looking down the inside as they go down to Surtees. Will he strike into McWhirter's? Hyam to the inside of O'Connor, eases him out the way, and Blake comes through with him, and O'Connor loses two spots in a corner. Lovely move from Ian Blake, right on the spot when he needed to be there. O'Connor doing well just to hold off John Maycock. So Richard Hyam up to second. Bit of a slide there in the middle of the Dell. Will that prove costly? Will he lose momentum down to the hairpin? Ian Blake's right there. The move is on. Ian Blake's coming through. Ian Blake into second place and on fire in this first final. So the question is, what can he do about Parmveen Ajar, who's 2.4 seconds up the road? Powell demotes Stu Simons. Chris Powell up to 6th, and he demotes the nearest man to him in the championship. So Stu Simons struggling in this first final. Perhaps a cart not to his liking. Pete O'Connor demoted from 4th. Back where he started on the grid. Chris Bell now looking for a way past Stu Simons as they go through Chandler's. Just a lift. And perhaps a slight dab of break from Simon Young in 9th place. To keep the car under control through Chandler's. Into the chicane once again and down to Raymond's to end lap 5. Powell takes a look down the inside of Maycock, but it's not a serious one. Tim Clark now is getting an overlap with Oliver Allwood, side by side. Is Allwood going to risk going round the outside? He doesn't get the chance as Clark straight lines it to the second element of the hook. So Tim Clark into the top 10. Carl Tebbett looking for a way past Allwood now. He's overhauled Brian Trott, so Brian Trott another struggling in the early going in this final. Tim Clark's next target is Simon Young. A healthy lift and a bit of break there into Chandler's. Dan Gore looking for a way past Trott. And the Crocodile streams through the chicane and down to the hairpin once again. In the background, Tim Clark's forced Simon Young to go in narrow, and on the crisscross, Tim Clark's got the overlap. Now he went through here, and he goes through again. Forceful but fair, leaving Simon Young to sort out the corner for himself. Carl Tebbett looking for a way past Oliver Allwood on his bumper. Into Surtees, Clark's already moved straight on to Chris Bell. So Tim Clark going well here, he's up to 9th place. There seems to have been some contact between Young and Allwood. Allwood waving him back through. So a lot of ground and time lost for Young. And there's a queue behind. Teal goes through on Dan Gore. So Darren Teal back into 14th. Gore coming back on the counter. Will he strike down the hairpin? He's letting Teal go defensive. Trying to get that crisscross going. And Simon Young's lost out to Allwood and is in the process of losing out to Carl Tebbett into the hook. Whoa, Chris Hansen down the inside of Gore and into the side of Darren Teal. It's got one position and he's making it hard work for Dan Gore, who loses out to Jeff Simons. And unfortunately that puts Gore at the back of the field, save for Johnny Goddard, who has retired. Your race leader, you could be forgiven forgetting about him. Parnveen Ajar, Ian Blake in second, not making perhaps the progress I would have expected. But there's still plenty of time. This is lap 8 of 12. And that said, the lead is down to 1.1 seconds. Here's the battle for 8th place. Clark makes Bell go in narrow, as he's done on the last 2 overtake manoeuvres. He'll be looking down at the hook. Trott goes a long way through on Simon Young. Here comes Tim Clark. This is the furthest back he's been, and he still made it work. Young holding off Trott, who's on the grass. Oh, there's more contact with Teal. Brian Trott getting reversed to the back of the field as Hansen and Jeff Simons goes through. Such are the margins in the Premier class. They're so well matched. 2 or 3 tenths is the difference between leading, as Parnveen Ajar is, and the back of the field with Dan Gore on lap pace. It's all about racecraft. It's all about the racing. And Tim Clark is closing in on Stu Simons. He's immediately dropped Chris Bell. So Tim Clark on a mission, looking to the inside, too far back. Stu Simons struggling to make an apex and get that cart turned. And here comes Tim Clark. His modus operandi for most of this final has been at the hook, but he wasn't close enough this time. He'll be there next time, I'm sure. Chris Powell trying to close on Pete O'Connor, looking for 4th place. Wide entrance to the second part of McWhirter's. Closing. Not close enough for Chandler's. It's a brave move, and Clark was right on the bumper of Simons for 7th. Oh, and look at that. Dan Gore gets it wrong. Simon Young looking to the inside of Hansen. Easing out the way was a little bit of contact, I'm not sure. But Young's gone through. So Simon Young back in 13th. Here comes Chris Powell down the inside of O'Connor. Lovely move from Chris Powell, picking up the places comfortably. And here comes Tim Clark once again. He's repeated that move and he goes through into the hook. Tim Clark up to 7th. Jeff Simons in 12th. Lovely 4-wheel drift into the hook there. Great to watch the Premier class. So Pete O'Connor trying to find a way back to Chris Powell, although that look over his shoulder for John Maycock in 6th says to me that I think Pete O'Connor's going to have to settle for 5th, unless Chris Powell makes a mistake. Ian Blake continues his march towards the lead. Palmvina Jar is half a second ahead now. Oh, Simons makes a mistake on the exit of the Dell. Fortunately for him, Oliver Allwood's not close enough to take advantage. Carl Tebbett down the inside of Bell. Carl Tebbett moves into the top 10 in 10th place. Bell down to 11th. Final lap board is out. Palmvina Jar has got 3-4 kart lengths on Ian Blake. Will that be enough as they go into McWhirters? Here they come then, down the Lancaster curve, half a lap from the finish. Ian Blake's running out of time. Oh, but he's closing in. He went in very committed into Chandler's and he's lost a kart length on the exit. Najjar's got a kart length and a half and he needs to nail the exit of the Dell. Into the chicane, there's going to be one shot for Ian Blake down at Raymond's. Najjar knows he's there, goes a little bit narrow to put him off, and that's enough. Palmvina Jar's going to win the first final at Llandow from Ian Blake. Richard Hyam, Chris Powell and Pete O'Connor finishes in 5th. Fastest laps from the preceding final and the earlier 2 heats decides the grid for the second final. In pole position, Chris Powell. On the front row with him, Ian Blake. Tim Clark, Oliver Allwood on row 2. Stuart Simon still manages to qualify in 5th and be looking for a better performance with Pete O'Connor from row 3. Richard Hyam, Brian Trott, and it's a measure of the quality in Premier Class. The race winner from final 1, Palmvina Jar, can only qualify in 11th place. Union flag at the ready. Who's going to get that crucial hole shot? It's Chris Powell ahead of Ian Blake. Oh, heavy shot from behind for Tim Clark from Stu Simons. Everybody getting their elbows out for the start of this second final. Down to Surtees. O'Connor looking at the inside of Simons. Simon Young, pod to pod with Chris Bell. Oh, there's more contact. O'Connor, Tebbett and Maycock are out in the infield. Goddard nearly gets dumped onto the sausage again. So it's Powell leading from Ian Blake out of Chandler's. Tebbett most upset. O'Connor and Maycock busy moving their carts. And the Clarks have seen enough. Hands in the air. This final has been aborted. We'll have a regrid and a restart. So we're back in position for a second attempt. We've lost 2 laps from this final. Chris Powell controls the pace out of Raymond's. Union flag at the ready. Eldridge throws it and Tim Clark's missed the start. Allwood's up to 3rd, tipping into the hook. Poor start from Tim Clark. It's a cleaner start through the first complex. Goddard's lost out to Simons, but he'll get a run round the outside of Chris Hansen down to Surtees. Everybody still on the track. This final will proceed, which is not to say there isn't some contact. It's a fact of life. The rubbing is racing, even if really racing is just life. So Carl Tebbett moves ahead of Dan Gore, goes for a bounce down the grass. Running in close proximity with Darren Teal. Chris Bell looking for a way past Brian Trott as they go down to Raymond's for the first time. It's Powell leading from Blake. Simons to the inside of O'Connor. It was late, it's side by side, it'll finish down in the hook. Who's going to turn in first? It's Simons. Trott going to go around the outside of the hook. It's not going to work in the second element and he loses out but stays ahead of Chris Bell. Simon Young on Chris Bell's bumper takes a look over his shoulder. As they slow down, there could be somebody coming up the inside into Surtees. Well, whoever it is, he's held him off. Probably John Maycock, I think, running in 10th. Hansen down the inside of Gore, but goes a long way in. And on the drag race around the Lancaster curve, Gore takes the position back, but he's running at the back of the field in 17th and 18th place for Chris Hansen. So it's Powell leading from Blake, Allwood, Clark, Simons. O'Connor under pressure from Brian Trott, looking a bit quicker in this final. Gets his wheels inside, eases O'Connor out the way, and gives a clean run to Chris Bell to go through as well. Simon Young's got an inside into the hook. Ooh, it's a bit of a squeeze. O'Connor hangs onto the spot. He stays in 8th place. Young in 9th. Maycock in 10th. We've got 4 away at the front. Simon's trying to escape from Brian Trott. Anybody going to chance it up the inside? That corner's effectively driven as a double apex. As you can see, there's the second apex on the exit that Johnny Goddard's used to good effect to get past Jeff Simons. The first apex is literally on the way in. It's actually a narrow defensive line. Out of the dell, Maycock trying to close on Simon Young. Ian Blake on the bumper of Chris Powell, but keeping his powder dry. Young to the inside of O'Connor. It's late. It's fairly clean. Has he got the overlap for the hook? It's side by side. O'Connor's going to be tempted to go in over the top, and he has. O'Connor hangs on to 8th and backs Young into Maycock and Palmby in a jar. Richard Hyam will be joining him shortly. So Young trying to find a way past his friend Pete O'Connor. Wide out of Surtees. Narrow, there's the first apex. There's a gap sometimes to the second where you can squeeze up the inside, but the door closes as quickly as it opens. So Powell and Oliver Allwood is coming across. We've got a 3-way dice. Let's call it a 4-way dice, as Tim Clark is just a cart length down on Oliver Allwood. 4 laps down out of 10. Ian Blake still happy to follow. Allwood coming across, and Clark's getting there. Young very late on O'Connor, and he feels obliged to wave him back through. I assume that's what that weird finger gesture is. Well, he's not lost out, or has he? Yes, he has. Najjar's taken the opportunity to punish Simon Young for his own indiscretion. And Maycock's now on his bumper looking for way by into Surtees. Ian Blake, through the inside. Chris Powell went in a bit too far, left the door open, and Ian Blake goes through. A mistake from Powell. So Clark trying to close on Oliver Allwood. Just can't quite get there. He's having a hang on. Hopefully the cart will come back to him. Allwood looking at the inside of Powell down at Raymond's. Can't get it done. Powell will be conscious not to let Ian Blake get away, but Oliver Allwood wants to be by. Brian Trott has gone past Chris Bell. So Trott in 6th place. O'Connor holding up a train of carts from 8th backwards to the back of the field. And Allwood's closing in on Chris Powell. Will he make the same mistake? Well, he has. He opens the door for Allwood. And he looks over his shoulder to see Tim Clark. And Ian Blake's pulled out a couple of cart lengths. Tim Clark now trying to close on Chris Powell. Just not quite close enough. Closing in under braking. Losing ground on acceleration. Look, it's a half a cart length going in, but it's a cart length coming off the corners. So Clark working hard to hang on to the leading trio. Simons now has Brian Trott for company. What's gone on here? O'Connor's made a mistake, and Palmby and Najjar's gone through. Palmby and Najjar up to 8th place. And John Maycock's gone with him, so Maycock in 9th, back on board, with Dan Gore looking for a way past Darren Teal for 13th. The door opens into McWhirters. He's not close enough to take advantage. He'll now try and get a good run through Chandler's and the Dell for a shot down at Raymond's. Simon Young got close to O'Connor in Chandler's, hasn't paid a penalty for it. Exiting the Dell. Up front, Ian Blake, Allwood, Powell, Clark. And we start lap 8 of 10. 3 laps to go. Simons has pulled out a cart length on Trott. Maybe Trott made a mistake because Chris Bell is trying to find a way by. Gap then to Najjar, Maycock, O'Connor. This is the back of that group. Dan Gore trying to find a way past Darren Teal. Teal on the defensive. It's Tebbit ahead of us, closing in on Simon Young. So Gore stuck in 14th place. And behind him, Jeff Simons, Richard Hyam, Johnny Goddard, Chris Hansen brings round the tail of the field. 18th place, but only 8 seconds off the lead. So back on board with Clark now, exiting Raymond's, starting the penultimate lap. Najjar's trying to hold off Maycock, and Young goes through on Pete O'Connor. He's made it work this time. Can he make it stick? I believe he has, and goes looking to the inside of Darren Teal for 13th. But he just can't get close enough or can't be committed enough to get that pass made. Allwood, can he do anything about Ian Blake? He's a cart length and a half down as they go through Chandler's. Gore still trying to find a way past Darren Teal, who's a little bit defensive into Chandler's, and Gore's not close enough to take advantage. Chris Bell moving on to the bumper of Brian Trott. That's the fight for 6th place. Call it 5th if you include Stu Simons, who's got half a cart length on the pair. We're moving on to the final lap. Darren Teal is holding off Dan Gore for 13th place. Parnley Najjar's doing his best to hold off John Maycock for 8th. Maycock looking to set him up for Surtees, but Najjar's wise to that, will go narrow into the corner. And Maycock will have to wait. A chance into McWhirters is covered by Najjar. They're slowing down though, and Simon Young is coming back to them. He takes a look over his shoulder, conscious of Carl Tebbett behind as Dan Gore's trying to find a way back past Jeff Simons, who went ahead in what is the fight for 14th. In fact, they're both ahead of Richard Hyam. Up front though, Simons holding off Brian Trott for 5th place as Ian Blake comes through to take a maiden win in Club 100 Premier Class ahead of Oliver Allwood and Chris Powell, who stays atop of the championship and secures the Welsh Open Championship. And there's a crown of daffodils waiting to be placed upon his head in the paddock. Ian Blake can milk the moment and look slightly ridiculous at the same time. It's just one of the few gifts he's been blessed with.